A Peterbilt tractor rolls through Fort Worth just after midnight, bound for El Paso, and the driver's seat is empty. No one is coming to relieve it. Try driving that stretch yourself, and federal law caps the trip at 11 hours before the rules force a stop. This is what a validated autonomous truck route looks like in Texas. An empty cab, a live commercial contract, and no clock running down on the driver. What actually changes once a truck stops needing to sleep? Federal hours of service rules have shaped long-haul trucking for decades. A commercial driver may drive for 11 hours only after 10 consecutive hours off duty, all inside a 14-hour window, under Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration rules reaffirmed in a September 17, 2025 Federal Register notice on driver rest periods. Beyond that limit, a human crew has to stop, sleep, or hand the load to someone else. A truck with no one in the seat carries no such biological clock at all. Aurora Innovation showed what removing that clock looks like on July 30, 2025, when it began driverless overnight runs on its Dallas to Houston freight lane. The company's own account was direct. That capability, it said, more than doubles truck utilization potential, because the vehicle keeps moving through the hours a human driver would otherwise spend parked and asleep. That is a company describing its own technology in its own press release, not an independently audited industry average, and it earns the same scrutiny any interested party's claim deserves. McKinsey's research describes the underlying design as a hub-to-hub model. The autonomous truck runs the long highway middle of a route, while a local driver still handles the first and last mile near each terminal, according to the firm's September 25, 2024 analysis. That structure matters more than it sounds, because the job actually in automation's path right now is not the entire driving occupation but specifically its long-haul, cross-state segment. Texas has become the industry's default proving ground for that segment, with several companies now running driver-out routes on its highways. Not every claim survives that audit. If a truck can run through the night as well as the day, the question stops being about hours and starts being about price. What does a pallet cost to move once the machine underneath it never has to stop moving on its own account? More than 2 million people currently hold the job that autonomous software is now aimed at. The Bureau of Labor Statistics counted 2,235 heavy and tractor-trailer truck driver positions in 2024, with median pay of $57,000 for under 40 that May, and projected 4% employment growth through 2034 in an Outlook page last revised August 28, 2025. That forecast predates commercial driverless freight. So where does a workforce that size go once the vehicle it operates no longer needs anyone inside it? Aurora put a number on the scale of that shift on July 22, 2026, when it said the Aurora driver had completed nearly 440,000 driverless miles by the end of June, spread across 10 routes throughout the U.S. Sunbelt. Its newest hardware, the company said, is built to last 1 million miles, and manufacturing partner Roush is targeting an annual production run rate of 1,000 Aurora trucks later this year. That is not a pilot bolted onto an existing fleet. It is a supply chain being assembled around a truck that has no seat for a driver at all. 7 months earlier, on May 6, 2026, Aurora told investors it planned to deploy more than 200 driverless trucks by year's end and had signed 7 customers into what it calls its driverless cohort, including new bidirectional routes between Dallas and Laredo and between Dallas and Oklahoma City. Multiply the miles by the customer list and a pattern appears. This is a company scaling deliberately along specific freight corridors, not chasing a single headline highway. Here is the detail that sharpens the utilization question from the opening. A truck engineered for 1 million miles of service life earns that investment back only by moving for more of each day than a truck idling at a stop overnight, mile after depreciating mile. Aurora already told investors in that July 30, 2025 announcement of nighttime driverless runs that skipping the overnight downtime moves a truck's output toward double what a daytime-only schedule allows. That ratio is still unproven at fleet scale. The logic of the machine matches the logic of the balance sheet regardless, and both point toward the same overnight hours. Cost is a related story. Back at that empty driver's seat crossing Fort Worth. The reason it stays empty is economic as much as technical. McKinsey's autonomous trucking analysis, published September 25, 2024, found that shifting to hub-to-hub autonomous operation could cut total cost of ownership by 42% per mile, but only on routes longer than 1,500 miles. Aurora's current Sunbelt lanes, including the Fort Worth to El Paso run, are shorter regional legs than that, which means the biggest documented savings in that same McKinsey analysis sit further out, on long-haul corridors this network has not reached yet. Labor numbers complicate the picture more than either of those two figures. The Bureau of Transportation Statistics reported on August 7, 2026, that truck transportation employment held at 1,165 workers in July, unchanged from the prior month but down 1.2% from July 2025. That is a soft dip, not a sudden break, and it lands while freight volumes nationally stay under pressure for reasons that have nothing to do with software, meaning an autonomous truck rollout is only one of several forces pulling on that employment line, not obviously the dominant one yet. Set Aurora's claimed doubling of utilization against the rule it is built to route around, and the comparison turns concrete. A human driver's legal ceiling is 11 hours of driving inside a 14-hour window, fixed by federal rule as of that September 2025 notice, while a truck with no driver carries no such ceiling built into the machine itself. Utilization stops being a marketing word under that comparison. It becomes the literal count of hours an asset earns money instead of sitting still. McKinsey supplies the second figure worth weighing, a 42% cut in cost per mile, measured across hub-to-hub routes over 2,500 miles as of September 2024, against a conventional driver-operated baseline that has barely moved in a decade. Does that gap actually hold at fleet scale? A corridor economy built on that gap does not need every mile automated to matter. It needs the long, monotonous middle miles automated, which is exactly the segment Aurora targeted first. The labor figures fit less neatly against those two, and the picture loses its tidiness there. The Bureau of Labor Statistics 2024 to 2034 projection, published before commercial driverless freight existed, still calls for 4% growth in the broader heavy and tractor-trailer driving occupation, even as July's employment count slipped year over year against the Bureau of Transportation Statistics' own separate count. Those two government numbers do not yet agree. Read plainly, federal statisticians have not settled on which forecast an autonomous truck fleet ultimately supports, and neither should anyone watching the routes from outside the industry. What ties utilization, cost, and labor together is concentration. Aurora's 10 routes, 7 customers, and a hardware platform built for 1 million miles all sit inside one company with access to enough capital to absorb McKinsey's separate warning that autonomous trucking cost estimates corrected upward by 50 to 60% since earlier projections. Is that a moat, or just an early lead that a better-funded rival could still close? A market this expensive to enter tends to reward whoever already has routes running revenue miles today, not whoever arrives next with a better pitch deck. 7 customers and 10 audited routes are a small sample by freight industry standards, but right now they are close to the only publicly documented sample that exists, and scarcity of that kind is its own form of advantage. None of this is settled, and the sources disagree with each other in ways worth naming rather than smoothing over. McKinsey's own January 6, 2026 mobility report doubled back on its earlier optimism, noting that cost estimates for autonomous trucking specifically had corrected upward by 50 to 60%, and that robo-taxis and full-journey trucks together would need more than $3 billion in additional software investment before either reaches market readiness. That is the same research house, revising its own number within about 15 months, which says something honest about how unsettled this market's economics still are. Regulators are not standing still either. The same September 2025 Federal Register notice that fixes the 11-hour driving cap also proposes a pilot letting human drivers pause their 14-hour window for up to 3 hours, stretching the practical on-duty day towards 17 hours without raising the driving limit itself. This gap is not frozen. That is its own moving target for anyone modeling this market years out. A newer, smaller entrant named Humble told Fortune on April 21, 2026, that an investor pitched a possible 30% to 50% efficiency gain from its cableless design, a projection from a company that had just closed a $24 million seed round aimed at a freight market Fortune put at $906 billion with no operating history yet to test the number against. Weigh that unproven pitch against Aurora's already running routes, and the honest answer to where the driving workforce goes is nowhere in particular yet, at a pace nobody in government statistics has pinned down. The Bureau of Transportation Statistics counted a 1.2% year-over-year dip, not a wave of layoffs tied to named routes. No source ties that dip to automation. Shift the frame from labor to ownership, and a sharper question sits underneath all of it. Who ends up holding the routes, the freight data, and the capital once the technology stops being experimental and starts being ordinary? That question, not the size of any single company's mileage count, is the one freight economists are actually watching heading into next year. Back to Fort Worth just after midnight. The tractor still rolls toward El Paso with an empty seat, only now the empty seat reads as a balance sheet decision as much as an engineering one. The verdict the numbers support is narrower than either the doubled utilization pitch or the job loss warnings suggest. An autonomous truck adds real hours to a vehicle's working day and real pressure to freight's cost structure, while the labor and market structure consequences are still being measured, government report by government report, not settled by any single company's press release. The road itself is not the story anymore. The balance sheet is. Facts over fear.